My name is Federico Bustamante, and I am in fact in charge of running a wonderful place called Casa Libre. And before I tell you more about that, we're going to watch a video. In case you haven't seen it.
Cuando llegué, no voy a poder, hasta hay veces estuve solo, triste, porque no puedo.
Se trata de miles de niños, 90,000 solo este año, que se atreven a cruzar solos la frontera. La mayoría viene de Centroamérica.
The flood of children has become a crisis for the government as it scrambles for solutions.
Almost 60,000 unaccompanied minors now live in the United States. Most are awaiting court hearings to determine whether they can stay.
A couple years ago, we saw a sudden influx of students coming to us, mostly 15 to 17-year-old boys from Guatemala predominantly, followed by Honduras and El Salvador. Families were sending their kids off by themselves to come up here, so a lot of them were unaccompanied at that time.
Mi nombre es Gaspar Marcos, tengo 18 años, soy de Guatemala y a los 3 años me vine aquí a los Estados Unidos. Ya a los 5 años ya no tuve padres, ya así me creí solo. Venir uno sin familia es lo más difícil de todo.
Oh man, Gaspar. Gaspar and I go way back, probably at least 3 years. So these kids, and particularly Gaspar, who's an orphan, and has suffered a very traumatic childhood, have never really had a childhood. Actually, you can't even call it that.
Creo que sí.
¿No te ha dicho?
Me dijo que él sí me contó de algo, pero le iba a ayudar, pero ya no. Porque sí, su situación está cabrón.
All right, students, if you look at this question, Tita Salon, JR, if you look at this question, what operation do you identify?
Many of the kids come to us with limited to no literacy, especially in English, and so we are starting from scratch.
Oh, I'm sorry, hold on, what's that? No, it's okay. Gaspar,
Ah, no, mister.
what do you think? 3 cuartos por Q, what does that equal?
Ah, no, mister.
Let's go back.
Hay veces ya los maestros hablan en inglés y si no entiendes, pues hay que tratar la manera que no te domine el sueño.
They come here to have a better life, but that's not always the case. Our students, a lot of them have to work, a lot of them have to send money home.
3 horas duermo, hay veces que no duermo, ya solo me baño y me vengo a la escuela. Pues lo principio hay que sufrir, pero más adelante tal vez tendré un buen futuro si tal vez Dios me permite estar haciendo lo mismo.
¿Quién trabaja acá? Bueno, Gaspar trabaja y ¿quién más trabaja?
Yo.
María,
En tu casa, María. ¿Alguna vez han sido discriminados de esas personas que trabajan en sus trabajos?
no.
¿No?
The biggest struggle we constantly face is just the misconception and misperception of who these kids are in the general public. A lot of people come to believe that they're gang members or drug dealers. They're young adolescents, with their own dreams and aspirations, no different than the kids born here.
Each kid has a different story. Each kid has a different life. Each kid has something to offer. They're here to make something of themselves because they couldn't in their own country.
Tengo amigos también que hacen lo mismo que yo y a veces vamos juntos en el trabajo o compartimos ideas, cómo estamos saliendo cada uno. De esta vida que estamos corriendo es lo más difícil y cansado, con sueño y con muchas ganas de estudiar, pero hay veces se cansa uno.
Te la presto tu radio, güey, es que necesita serie más.
Te lo picho antes.
Órale. ¿Dónde está el pedo, Fredo?
So a lot of these kids, you know, it's very common that they work, but unfortunately it's very common that they also work in, you know, very, very poor conditions. Other kids that, you know, will do a full day at school and then do a 12-hour shift and get like 4 or 5 hours sleep.
Donde trabajo yo, mínimo son 5,000 platos. Da vuelta como más de 30 veces a la noche.
It's really hard to articulate just how smart Gaspar really is. But, you know, a lot of these kids are that smart, but because of their, you know, their linguistic obstacles, it's like you know, these mute geniuses that we're missing out on.
This first wave have been here for 2 years now, and many of them are picking up the language. In order to say where they're going to be in 2 more years is something that we're still exploring.
It's not just the valedictorians and the 4.0s and the, you know, underwater robotics teams that should get, you know, the accolades. You know, it's the kid that learned English in less than a year. The things that they're accomplishing are incredible, considering, you know, where they come from and the resources they've had at their disposal.
Les digo a mis amigos que no nos echamos para atrás, porque es esta vida que nos tocó, pues tenemos que vencerlo como dé lugar.
All right, pretty powerful stuff, huh? You know, no matter how many times you watch it, you know, it just hits you right there, you know. It really, really does, and yeah, we just can't show it enough because everybody really needs to watch it. So for all of you that hadn't watched it before, please make sure that some of your friends watch it when you get home this evening. And yeah, and so now, thank you so much for joining us for Does It Really Take a Village? Welcoming and empowering our unaccompanied and refugee children. Or as I think some of your programs might have, let me put this higher, please. Is that better? Is that good? Yeah, okay. Or I think some of your programs might have it as the Gaspar Marcos story in Casa Libre. And that, in a sense, it will be a presentation about Gaspar Marcos, but not the student that you just saw in this wonderful little piece here. But it'll be rather what he's come to symbolize for millions of people across the country. And you know, this whole issue of migration, of immigration, of forced migration is not new. The phenomenon of these kids fleeing from their lives from unstable countries is not new. It's been going on for decades, right? But just 2 years ago, we had the crisis at the border, right? All the kids, the crisis before, the humanitarian crisis, right? You had the buses being blocked in Murrieta, had the foil blankets, we had the people catching the loogie on the face and everybody overwhelmed. But what came after that, right? Not that much, right? Everyone was kind of silent, and then all of a sudden there was this, revamping and this re-bolstering of the immigrant community, and a lot of it was in part thanks to this video, right? But why? Why was it this sudden interest in our own communities to start talking about the elephant in the room, right? What was it about Gaspar's story that hit home? Was it the fear of Trump? Was it just the phenomenon of the internet and going viral? Was it his good looks? Because he was a good-looking guy, could be. Maybe, But above all, Gaspar gave the community a face and a name, okay? And that face and the name looked like this, right? A multicolored mosaic of support in millions of people and the hundreds of thousands of comments that all said the same thing. I am Gaspar. That's my story, right? And so what happened is that people felt visible. And with this visibility, people felt validated. And for a community that's been forced to live in the shadows forever, this validation and this visibility is a liberation that is indescribable. And really, this visibility and validation of the immigrant community, particularly the undocumented immigrant community, and more specifically the undocumented immigrant and refugee minor community, that's kind of at the heart of Casa Libre and why we become a beacon of education and empowerment and really hope in our little corner of MacArthur Park, which we like to refer to as the Ellis Island of Central American immigration, because so many of our Central American migrants find their way there to start off. But at the end of the day, what we want is people to take our best practices and ensure that not only our students, but our friends, our mentors, our colleagues, and everybody else that comes into contact with Casa Libre walks away saying, I am Casa Libre, I am Gaspar Marcos, I have a vested interest in the success of this place, right? And Casa Libre isn't new. Casa Libre has been around for almost 20 years. Some of you may know, some of you may not know, but we've been around for almost 20 years. But why is it now? Why is it now that all of a sudden, we're getting invited to conferences and getting invited to speak places and people are wanting to come out for tours? I mean, it's probably Gaspar, really. He's quite a charismatic guy. But, part of it is also the change that we brought about in our program and the way that we address this crisis with these kids. And part of that change, and the biggest change really, has been that we're no longer running the youth shelter model, right? And what I mean by that, I'll explain, is that we feel that the youth shelter model has been focused too much around charity, right? And charity only goes so far, right? I mean, even the word charity, the synonyms are sympathy, not empathy. And if you're working with anyone, with any human being, what you need is empathy, not sympathy, right? When you start working with sympathy, you're already starting off on the wrong foot, right? You're putting yourself above the person that you're helping, right? And that's kind of counterproductive to what you're trying to do, right? It starts to create a culture of dependency and not empower self-sufficiency, right? And so that's one of the biggest changes that we had. And you guys, I'm sure all know, Father Greg Boyle from Homeboy Industries, one of my idols. Yes. Oh, here's Father Greg Boyle. But he's one of my idols, one of my role models, and just someone that I really look up to. And he says it best, right? Because he talks about kinship, and that's something that's very, very near and dear to his heart, is this idea of kinship, right? And kinship, he says, is not serving the other, but being one with the other, right? And that is the difference that Casa Libre has brought about to dealing with this demographic of students, is that we are not saying, come, let me help you. No, we're saying, let me get down there and see how we can get back up there, right? And that's really what's making the difference. And as a result, we were also focusing, prior to this kind of switch in focus, we were focusing kind of on the wrong thing. We were focusing, because of this lack of kinship, because of this lack of being one with the other, we were focusing on the wrong thing. We were focusing on the legal, right? Legalize these kids. They're illegal. Document them. Get them legalized, right? Legal, legal, legal. But then what we were doing is we were further dehumanizing these kids by turning them into legal cases to be won or lost, or worse still, troubled teens and gangbangers to be fixed or healed, right? And that was having a terrible effect on these kids, because what ended up happening was that we were getting them legalized, we were getting them documents, but what about the rest of it, right? So we were creating a documented sweatshop force, and that is really what continues, this vicious cycle of exploitation, poverty, in our immigrant communities, right? And so we said, no, we got to switch this around. We got to start focusing on what really matters. And it's not to say that, our students' legal concerns aren't urgent and very, very important, but that's just to say that when we frame the kids in this fashion, when we turn them into something as arbitrary as a legal case, as a statistic, then we're missing the point. If we really hope to empower these students to reach their full potential. So, about 6 years ago, when we had this revelation, right, we decided to take a radical leap of faith. You ready? All right. So, bear with me here. What if we treated them like children? Hashtag they are children. But no, seriously, what if we treated them like children, right? And I don't mean patronizing them the way we often do to kids, but I mean really embracing them as our own kids, as our own children, with all their curiosity and imagination and unlimited potential and, sometimes frustrating behavior, but, not criminalizing them because of it. What if we did that? And then we thought, well, what would we want for our own kids? Well, first and foremost, education, right? That's what we want for our kids, so why not these kids? And so we said, okay, so this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna focus on the individual, and we're gonna focus on that education. Who is this person and what makes them tick, right? Emmanuel, who's late, I don't know where he's at, but I'll yell at him. Oh, there he is, who was late, right? He's a wrestler, okay? So I'm not gonna start taking him to courthouses and legal offices like I would Tomas, who wants to be a lawyer, right? In the same way that I wouldn't take him to a nursing school where I would take Gaspar because he wants to go into medicine, right? But if we make this mistake of assuming that, we're all Mexicans, so we all like to play soccer, right? Then, it's kind of disastrous to starting a conversation with these students, right? And so that's what I'm saying. We really got to focus on the individual. And again, just for any attorneys in the room, this is not to detract from the importance or urgency of your legal cases, okay? We understand those are, very, very important. But they're not all going to get to stay. I mean, we've seen with the recent administration and the recent, executive actions that a green card sometimes isn't enough. So what happens if these kids get returned to their country of origin and all they had was the worst road trip of their life? What are we doing? So, education. No one can take that from you. And if they do happen to be returned to their country of origin, they're going to, return with better odds in their favor. And if they do happen to be the lucky ones that get immigration relief here in the United States, they'll be exactly what we want in our immigrant communities. Educated immigrant youth that not only are educated themselves, but value the importance of education, and will bring that to their communities and help stop and stem this, cycle of ignorance and willful ignorance that occurs in our communities. And so, how did we do this? So, pretty simple, really. What we did was welcome and empower them, just like the title of the presentation says, right? And so when we realized that we were sometimes further dehumanizing our students by treating them, like I said, as statistics, right? We took a step back, right? And we said, okay, we're gonna work with the individual. But now that we're gonna work with the individual, what part of this individual are we gonna work with, right? Are we gonna work with the symptoms that this individual is displaying, or are we gonna work with the roots of the problems that might be causing these symptoms to be displayed? And so that's what we decided to do. We started tackling the roots and not the symptoms, right? We started thinking, and asking our students, okay, so what is it that makes you act like this? What is it that makes you think like this? What is it that makes you feel like this? And so the symptoms are many, too many to list, but the root causes always kind of came back to the same things, right? And it was, like, we don't feel visible. We don't feel valuable. We don't feel seen. They make us feel ashamed, And that's what we kept going back to. And so we said, okay, so how can we start addressing that? And so we decided to rip off that scarlet letter and replace it with a badge of honor. Right? That powerful, right? Because when our students started realizing that this journey that they made is actually pretty incredible to have survived it, and that it takes a lot of grit and just determination and got a bunch of other qualities that most of us probably don't have, then you start spinning it to something positive. Start making them see themselves in a positive light instead of as this constant source of shame, right? And we said, welcome home, Casa Libre, right? But then we encounter another problem because we realize, wait a minute, welcome home might not mean the same thing to them that it might mean to us, right? A lot of these kids are coming from broken communities, broken countries, from broken homes, right? Welcome home might be like, no, I don't want to go home. You know, I don't want to go home. Or worse still, you want to go to a shelter? Hell no, right? I don't know if you guys heard, just like about four or 5 days ago, 22 kids died in a shelter in Guatemala, right? These places are synonymous with disaster in Latin America, and unfortunately, up here, we just keep saying, albergue, 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 not knowing that these people are like, oh my God, no, give me away from that, right? So we said, okay, we're gonna have to welcome them home, but we have to kind of really explain what that home is, right? And so we said, okay, the first thing you need to do is we gotta establish some trust. Because if you don't have trust with anyone, I mean, whether it be your partner or your friend or your colleague, like, good luck, okay? Good luck, right? But how do you get that trust, right? How do you get that trust from kids that have been abandoned and abused and neglected and, you know, led into traps, you know, even more attractive than something like this, right? How do you do it? And the way you do it is by first and foremost recognizing our implicit bias. And I know we've heard about that in this conference, I'm sure. But recognizing that, right? Recognizing our own implicit bias. No matter how in the trenches we are and how down with the cause we think we are, we still have implicit bias, right? And the first thing we gotta do is recognize that, right? And once we recognize that, then, you know, and then we can start, you know, to really start kind of working through things, right? And what I mean by that is, for example, like my cell phone, right? Like I leave the cell phone anywhere in Casa Libre, right? On my desk, dining room, the bathroom, it doesn't matter where, right? Can't tell you how many times I have guests that come by and they're like, oh my God, you just leave your cell phone there? It's like, oh my God, you just leave that there? You don't think they're gonna steal it? And I'm like, no. I mean, obviously, you know, confidential files, corrosive chemicals, and sharp knives are all under secure lock and key. But we're not bolting chairs to the ground, right? We're not giving them the message, you know, we're not projecting on them this image of oh, you know, you're a street kid, you're troublesome, I gotta beware of you, right? And by doing that, we start to develop that trust, you know? By the second they walk in the door, being like, here it is, don't drop it, right? And they don't, because no one's ever given them that, you know? Everyone's always expected them to fail, you know? People have always expected the worst and given them the worst, right? And when you give them something that valuable, especially as a complete stranger, they start, you know, thinking a lot of different things, like, wait, why is he giving me this? You know, this is really valuable, like, what does he want? But maybe he doesn't want anything, but maybe it's because I'm actually like a good person. And that's when you start, you know, reframing their own narrative in their own heads by giving them your trust. And in return, lo and behold, they give you theirs. And it takes us back to this need for kinship, right? And you really have to have this idea of kinship in your work, because it gets us past that archaic charity model and really, you know, gets us to the sympathy for empathy, and on the side of empathy, hopefully. And so after this trust starts to flow, and you start, you know, to realize a few important things, right? One thing is that despite their trauma does not define them, okay? These kids are not defined by their trauma. These kids are not victims. They are not victims, okay? I want that to be loud and clear. These are some of the most resilient, incredible, and just all-out amazing people you ever meet, and we should be in awe of them, right? So take your implicit biases, recognize them, and then recognize who these students really are, okay? Because you will not meet more amazing people than these three human beings here and everybody that they represent. The other thing too is the media, you know, likes to focus on the rape and the murder and the trauma and all that gory stuff that sells in the media, right? But guess what? Sometimes the biggest trauma is having nobody, just being adrift, alone in this sea of a city that's Los Angeles, California, with all the new sights and sounds and languages and cultures and all being bombarded to you at the same time. Like that could be way more traumatizing than any of that gory stuff that people like to, you know, put in your face on Facebook or on the media. You know, and once we realize that, then we start saying, okay, then yeah, then maybe welcoming them home, okay, we are on the right track, right? And then, once we're on the right track, we have to have the empowerment and the unconditional support and guidance, right? And unconditional is the key word, right? These kids are used to people saying, hey, I'll help you out. 3 months later, sorry, you're out of our program, sayonara, right? Casa Libre is not like that, all right? None of these guys live in Casa Libre anymore, but they all still come back. You know, some of you still have stuff there that they couldn't take to where they live now, right? Because it's their home, right? And it's unconditional, and they know that no matter what, they can always come back to Casa Libre. And the most important thing, cultural competency, okay? Cultural competency. So earlier, right, we had the misconception that we're all Mexican, we all play soccer, right? Well, another misconception is that we're all Mexican, we all speak Spanish, right? A very large group of these students come from Guatemala, and they speak Mayan dialects. So for example here, all right, there's 3 that aren't actual Mayan dialects. You should be able to point them out, right? If you can't, then you should probably start learning which ones they are, because it makes a difference when you're talking to your students from Guatemala. It makes a difference to know if they speak Mam or Cachiquel or whatever one of these might be, right? But if you can't tell the difference between 3 of them that aren't supposed to be there, then you might not be in a good place to talk with one of those kids. Dictionaries like this and workbooks like this, we have at Casa Libre, right? And it's not only to show our cultural competency that we know about their culture, but also to empower them to embrace their own culture. A lot of these indigenous students come from Guatemala wanting to shed that whole part of their identity because they've been taught to believe that it's inferior in their own home countries, and then even more so here, right? When they have some of the richest heritage and the richest cultures in the world and in the history of the world. And so with these, we not only try and show our cultural competency, but we also try and show them that their heritage and their language, their native language, is valuable. So, can you guys tell me which one's where? One's in Guatemala, one's in Honduras, one's in El Salvador. All right? You probably can't, right? Exactly. So, that's the kind of stuff. No, but seriously, that's the kind of stuff that you guys, working with this demographic of students, need to start learning, because when you can start talking about Por Casa San Salvador to a kid, and you can describe what it looks like overlooking the city, like they're gonna be like, yeah, you know where I come from. Like, I can talk to you. But if you're like, where are you from? El Salvador? Where's that? Then, they're already gonna get on the defensive, right? And it's not just the, topography and the language that you've got to be aware of. It's also, cultural stuff, like you'll see here. Okay, here.
Even something as simple as what you cook with is important.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll just explain what's going on. So this is a wonderful documentary that's on Netflix. It's called Living on $1. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Living on $1, it's on Netflix. And it's actually a group of friends of ours that went down there and explored what it's like to live on $1 a day, right? Because that's the harsh reality that a lot of people face worldwide. And they went down there and they lived for 56 days, I believe, in a rural village in Guatemala near Peña Blanca. And then, and they explored what it was like to live like that, but then they also ended up learning a lot of different stuff. And one of the things they learned was this thing called condina, right? And so a lot of times people have to have big purchases, like for example a stove, but they don't have the money necessary to buy it all in one go. So what they do is that they get a group of friends from the community, 10, 12, 20, however many you want, and then this happens. So each person donates $12, and then one person gets it at random. Then the next time, another person, and the next person, and the next person, and the next person, until everyone's been able to buy their stove, or fix their roof, or install a floor, or whatever it is that they needed the money for, right? And this is something that is also very important to be aware of when you're dealing with demographic, cultural things like this, right? Cultural things like the kind of farming that they do, right? All this stuff is very important, and also, it really makes you see the difference between, our culture back home, so to speak, and our culture here, because here, the second we get here, it's immediately, closed-minded, the blinders. I'm not going to share any information, like, immigration might be around the corner, like, right? And so we're losing our sense of community, in addition to all the other things that are happening because of what's going on. And so then, once you start learning all this and having all the cultural competency necessary to work with these students, can everyone hear me though? Tell me if you can't hear me. No? Oh, well, you guys gotta scream then. Here, I'll put both of them on. There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So anyway, so when you start learning about these kinds of cultural things and the languages and the culture and the customs, then you really start to be able to have a better idea of everything that encompasses a good welcome. It's not just, hey, here's a home and a bed. It's not just, hey, here's a home and a bed and I speak Spanish. You know, it encompasses a whole lot more and gets a lot more nuanced and individualized if you really want to have the kind of results that we've been having, and if you really want to help empower these kids to have a new life in the United States. And so, this is what the inside of Casa Libre looks like. Okay, so you might have seen pictures of detention centers. Well, like this. You may have seen pictures of detention centers, you know, with the float blankets and the cages and all that good stuff. Right? Completely different. You may have seen other shelters, right? That just right here in Los Angeles, completely different, right? Because we are a home, right? On paper, we might be a group home, but in practice and in reality, take away the group, we're a home, okay? And we're a home for a very particular kind of student, the undocumented, unaccompanied, and refugee minor. We have a computer lab. All our computers come equipped with Rosetta Stone in both English and Spanish. As I let you guys know earlier, a lot of these guys come speaking Mayan dialects. English is their third language. Raise your hand if you speak 3 languages. Oh wow, nice. More than I expected, but still, perfect. And they have their own rooms. They can set up their own spot. They're adolescents, they need space to stretch their legs, to have some privacy. This is Emmanuel's room and 1/3 of the medals that he won while he was at Casa Libre. Right? And ultimately, what that creates is this. It's a home. This is Christian, one of our graduates, but you're not going to be able to hear him either. Yeah, you're not going to be able to hear him either. Anyway, all he says is pretty much, Casa Libre means home, right? That's what he explains. It means home. It's where you go back and you feel welcome. It's where you're with your brothers, whether you share blood or not. You look out for each other and you lift each other up, and that's where your home is, and that's what Christian's talking about. And then finally, we'll talk about educating and empowering, and what do we do now, right? So the need, so we'll just skip this slide, it's not going to work. So in education, let's see if we, right for the next slide. Next one, please. So obviously we have a sense of camaraderie, the whole surrogate family, but we also have alternative therapy. You know, these kids, we're obviously very, very aware of the trauma that they come with, and that we need to address that. And it's not always in the, you know, standard sit in front of someone and tell your troubles. Sometimes we do yoga, sometimes we do meditation, sometimes we do music workshops, right? But like I said, it's about thinking of a whole new model that deals with the individual in a whole new way. Next one, please. Oh, yeah. And ultimately, you know, what that creates is an environment where they can be kids and enjoy that last little bit of childhood they may have left. And then educating and empowering. Great poster when you go into juvenile hall here at Eastlake, right? And I want you to read it, and I want you to commit it to memory because it's so important, right? The way you see them is the way you treat them, and the way you treat them is the way they often become. No truer word spoken, right? And that's what we have to, once again, going back to the implicit bias, right? You gotta check that implicit bias, because if you don't check that implicit bias, that's often how they become, right? And that's what Casa Libre is doing. And that's what Casa Libre is doing that a lot of other shelters aren't doing. We're addressing this implicit bias that we all have, and we understand that they're not predisposed to be gardeners or dishwashers, as a lot of other places, believe it or not, might think. So yeah, we'll look at this later if you want. And then we start talking about their students and their education. And these are desired student traits, right? Social emotional intelligence, grit, optimism, research, integrity. But we're not looking at these students on the right scale. We're looking at them based on our scale and not the scale that they come from, right? So you're talking about grit. These guys don't have grit, right? Integrity. These are some, I mean, I'll tell you stories about Gaspar and all that he's donated to help not only those two guys, but his entire community. How's that for integrity? Research? How do you think they got up here? What, you think they had a tour guide? No, right? But we're measuring them on the wrong scale, right? We're not meeting them where they're at. And we're losing unlimited potential in these students because we're not realizing that they're coming ahead of the curve, not behind it, but we're not looking at them through the right lens. Thank you. Good video? Yeah, so hopefully this video works.
Federico, I want
Oh, we're running out of time? All right, give me like 2 more minutes and we'll be done. Or actually, 3.5 minutes. I don't know if you guys have seen The Wire. Yeah, that's what I said.
Yo, what's this about here?
This one here. A bus traveling on Central Avenue begins its route by picking up 8 passengers. At the next stop, it picks up 4 more, then additional 2 at the third stop while discharging 1. The next to last stop, 3 passengers get off the bus and another 2 get on. How many passengers are still on the bus when the last stop is reached? Splitting ahead.
Yo, Tesla's coming out today. New package.
I might be down later.
Later.
Look, I'll catch you around the way, alright?
Wallace, man, you can't stay up in here.
7, right?
D been asking about shit.
So what?
I've been telling him you sick, but you know he ain't gonna let me carry that too much longer.
Now look, I'll be down later. Sometime.
Nah, man, Tesla's gonna be out.
Look, man, fuck the Teslas, alright? Fuck the Teslas, fuck D, fuck all of that shit. Just let me hold $10 and I give it back to you by Friday.
How? D ain't gonna pay you for that work.
Look, you gonna let me hold 10 or not?
$8.
Damn, Sarah, look. Close your eyes. You work in the ground stash. 20 tall pinks. 2 fiends come out to you and ask for 2 each. Another one cops 3. Then Bodie hands you all 10 more. But some white guy rolls up in the car, waves you down, and pays for 8. How many vials you got left?
15.
How the fuck you able to keep the count right? You're not able to do the book properly.
Something else will fuck you up.
That's right.
Right?
What was his answer?
You don't get the count right, they fuck you up. Right, and so that's what we're seeing, right? This incredible intelligence that's just being looked at through the wrong lens, right? And so, for example, this gang graffiti, 18th Street, right? Well, guess what? We turned it into a Roman numeral lesson, right? And it's everything about reframing that education, you know, taking them from where they were to where we want them to be by reframing it and putting them in situations like this, underwater robotics, Caltech methane study, and most importantly, people like this, people like them that are reaching those heights in underwater dreams, for example, and underwater robotics. And no training wheels, okay? Just lifeguards. So we obviously stand by and take pictures, but we let them do what they need to do because that's what gives them the confidence to believe they can do it themselves. If we hold their hands and fill out the forms for them, they're not going to know how to fill it next day. Yeah, ahora que. All right, ladies, 1 more minute. So we made it all the way to the United Nations, right? So we're being recognized. So we got to know we have a worldwide platform. 2 is we got to start reframing it, right? These aren't victims. These are musicians. These are athletes. These are artists. Okay, reframe it. And most importantly, start mixing them up with other people. Don't keep preaching to the choir. Don't keep going in our own neighborhoods. Start reaching out to the more affluent neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that don't know us, right? That's who needs to know who we are. That's who needs to meet us. So for example, Loyola High School is our most recent partnership. And get the community involved, right? You don't have to be a millionaire to be able to contribute. Contribute your best asset. If you're a baker, bring some bread by. If you work with appliances, fix our washer, right? But that's how everyone ends up having this vested interest and this franchise in this place called Casa Libre, and more importantly, the students that it services. And get on 5 calls, all right? Call your senators, call your congressmen, get active. Share this information. And that is all. Oh, no, 2 minutes extra. All right. So, without further ado, I would love to introduce you to 3 of our students. Our first student I'm going to introduce you to is Tomas. Tomas, come on up. Tomas Guacha. Tomas is an amazing individual who is one of the very, very few souls that has been diligent enough and strong enough to go through the entire high school at LUSD up to age 22. The last year they allow you to graduate, and he's worked it from 0.
Emmanuel Cepeda comes from El Salvador, and Emmanuel is the current champion in the city of Los Angeles for wrestling at 152 pounds. And last, but most certainly not least, Mr. Gaspar Marcos, the man of the hour, who you all know from the video, who has been just setting record after record for his benevolence and activism and everything else that you'd hope from an immigrant in their new home. So please give a round of applause for these two guys. So, for those of you that want to do questions in English, questions in Spanish, questions in both. Sit down, guys. Grab your microphone. There you go. We got a question there in the back. Do we have microphones for them?
So you're going to have to speak really loud if you're talking from back there, please.
Voy a hacer la pregunta en español. Primeramente me da mucho gusto y mucho orgullo que estén aquí presentes representando a nuestra juventud, ¿verdad? Guatemalteca, hondureña, salvadoreña. Y con eso dicho, quisiera también preguntarles qué es lo que más les ha ayudado a salir adelante.
So let me just translate for those of you that didn't understand. What has helped you, so she said, thank you, very nice to have you here, it's an honor to have you here, and I'd like to ask you what has helped you most to get ahead. Is that a good translation? Perfect. El que quiera puede contestar.
Bueno, lo que principalmente me ha motivado es como ver cómo la comunidad latina e hispana es tratada aquí en los Estados Unidos. Yo he tenido experiencias en trabajo, o ya sea en el deporte, en la calle o en mi comunidad, experiencias de racismo y también odio en contra de las personas indocumentadas. Lo que me ha motivado a mí es eso y también ver a mi propia gente caer, a mi propia raza, a mi propia comunidad salvadoreña, ver caer en la tentación y también verlos de que no tienen oportunidades y por eso muchos de ellos son deportados o también directamente se ponen a trabajar. Por eso me motiva a mí seguir estudiando y seguir siendo un deportista.
Oh. Yeah, I should have been listening. No, I was playing. Emmanuel was describing what motivates him here in the United States, and he was saying that what motivates him is seeing a lot of times how our communities, our immigrant communities in particular, are treated and downtrodden, and how he's experienced himself and sees our communities experience a lot of racism and xenophobia, and that through his own example, through the sports and education, that he hopes, or that he sees the importance in that in his sports and education. ¿Y qué más? Actually, you know what? Why don't you answer him in English? Oh, no. Sorry. ¿Y qué más dijiste? Oh, and to see, your own people, not only as an immigrant community, but more particularly from El Salvador. And I think him and I have spoken about that, and so I'll elaborate a little bit on that, is the fact that El Salvador has become synonymous with gang members, the same way I'm Colombian, and my whole life has been, oh yeah, Pablo Escobar, right? No, not him, but Colombia, yes. Woo! And unfortunately, it's an unfortunate phenomenon of the situation that we have, and so for him in particular, being from El Salvador and having his country associated with something so negative, it can be very, very hurtful, and I wanted to elaborate on that because him and I, that's the topic we've actually talked about a lot. Question?
Thank all of you. Casa Libre.
Casa Libre. You can find us on Instagram, Casa_Libre.
Really moved by the concept and how that works. And so I applaud you for that, and I think there's so many in the city and the county of Los Angeles that could learn from what it is, that model that you guys are using there. And to you guys, you know, I'll probably get a little emotional because there's so much that I didn't know that I learned today in reference to the language. I had no idea. I thought everybody speaks Spanish. You know, I thought it was a crime to say Mexicans, you know, that you had to learn to say Hispanics, and still not really knowing. And you are so brave and you are so resilient. And to the video man, the movie star, I want to give you I want to hug you. And I'm gonna hug you. Because I want to touch you, and the reason that I want to touch you is because you are amazing. You are courageous. You are very brave, and you put it on the screen so that everyone can be moved and touched by you and your story. That took a lot of courage. I am proud to be in an audience and to be having an opportunity to even speak to you. Can I hug you right now?
We'll wait till the end. Well, okay, more questions in the back. We'll go my right here first. Right there, yeah. Everybody's good on English, right? I don't have to translate to Spanish.
I can do both.
Okay. No, go ahead.
Primero quiero darle las gracias a los muchachos por estar aquí, por su valentía de estar enfrente de este grupo de desconocidos. Pienso que son un orgullo para todos los muchachos que están luchando día a día, tratando de asimilar la cultura americana, siguiendo los sueños personales y los sueños de sus familias. So I just wanted to congratulate them and really applaud them for being so brave and being here before a group of strangers. And for, I also said that they're a great example for all those young immigrants that are here trying to follow their own dream and also the dream of their parents. And I'm actually shaking. I'm an immigrant, a daughter of immigrants. One of the things that I didn't hear, and I would like to know how your program is dealing with the trauma that we experience crossing the border, because that is real, and you carry that. And not only the trauma of leaving your family, your culture, your friends, your community, but the experiences that a young child goes through as they're crossing to a whole new country. And not to say the experiences that you lived in your country that got you here today, because you didn't leave your country because you just wanted to experience something new. There was something real and tragic going on that got you here. So I just wanted to know how, if you can share, how are you dealing with that, the sense of loss and everything else that's going on in their mind?
Well, we do it in a variety of ways. We obviously partner with a wide array of different medical providers, whether it be St. John's, Clínica Romero, Amanecer. These are mental health providers that provide your standard therapy one-on-one, or sometimes they do group therapy, right? And we do that, and we send our students to that. But what we do, and like I said, that has a lot of different healing properties, is not only these yoga and meditation, but also when like I said, we're home, so our students come back, right? And we don't pull up the ladder, and that's something that we teach and we ingrain very, 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 very much in these students, right? You don't pull up the ladder, you come back, and you teach the students that come after you what worked for you, what didn't work for you, right? And when they come back, I mean, these three guys, like I said, they keep coming back to Casa Libre. They don't live there anymore. But the students that are at Casa Libre now are learning from them. And inevitably what happens, and they don't know, but I know, because I'm the fly on the wall, right? And when they start getting together, you end up with a dining room full of these guys all talking about their experience. And it becomes a healing circle, an impromptu healing circle. And for an adolescent, it's that much more effective because it was their idea. You didn't put them in front of a therapist, because then it's like, but if you have and you facilitate those kinds of environments and settings, the therapy can sometimes happen organically, and it does. I'm saying it's not the only way we do it. We obviously go through licensed social workers and clinical therapists and all that. for the PTSD and all that. But, like I said, we gotta start thinking outside the box. It's not just that that's gonna help it. Yes?
I wanna say thank you for coming and being here today. It makes a difference when we're talking about children of trauma to see the children, and I appreciate you being here. I'm wondering how each of you found your way to Casa Libre, because I can only imagine what it would feel like to be in this country and not know English and not know anybody. So I'm just wondering how students find their way to your organization.
Entonces, preguntó que cómo encontraron ustedes a Casa Libre. Entonces empecemos con Gaspar y después Emanuel y después Tomás.
Bueno, yo cuando llegué en este país sí sufrí un poquito porque no tengo familias y estaba trabajando un día que Federico apareció allí, pues empezó a sacarme plática. A mí me costó agarrarle confianza porque soy una persona que me cuesta agarrar confianza de una persona que acabo de conocer y me costó así, me empezó a platicar porque lo que me ha motivado a mí es como estudiar, seguir estudiando para ser alguien en la vida. Pues me empezó a convencer ir a vivir en Casa Libre, pues nunca lo había visto en mi vida, pues se me hizo un poquito raro, pues mejor, sí, se me hizo un poquito raro por una persona que me viene a explicar así. Después un día pasaron los meses y un día me dijo, yo en donde vivía decía, quiero ir a la escuela, pero él me decía que te voy a ayudar, y después un día me dijo, te voy a ir a inscribir en la escuela, y wow, dije, es mi oportunidad. Pues fui a Casa Libre, pues después él me metió a la escuela, y así fui aprendiendo, porque cuando llegué en este país, nunca supe que había un lugar donde se podía estar ahí para seguir estudiando, o una educación que nos enseña todo, a aprender inglés, tienen computadoras ahí para Rosetta Stone, y así conocí a Federico y doy gracias que él me siga apoyando ahorita y sigo estudiando, y gracias.
All right. So the question was, how did you guys find Casa Libre? And so Gaspar explained that I ran into him one day, and we started talking and about what he did and who he was, where he's from, all that. And then I started telling him about what I did, right, and explaining the importance of education and all that, and started trying to convince him, right. And he definitely did not trust me at all, at all. I remember I was surprised when he even got in the car the first time, to tell you the truth. But he'd never seen me, and then I kept telling him about enrolling in school, and then the place that he was living at, months later, after we'd met, he kept thinking he wanted to go to school, and then I said, hey, I'll enroll you in school. I will enroll you in school, and I said, you know what, that's my chance. That's my chance. If he's gonna enroll me in school, then I gotta go for it. And he came to Casa Libre, and he said that he never known that a place like Casa Libre existed where you could continue studying, and have your needs met. And he's happy to have resources and to have found Casa Libre. Tomás, how did you find Casa Libre?
Bueno.
In English.
Okay, when I came here 5 years ago, I got my dream to go to school. But when I came here 4 years ago, I told my brother. He told me I cannot go to school because I came here just to work. That's why I make a decision to go to school. But when I came to school, I talked to my counselor, and my counselor helped me to find the Casa Libre. When I found Federico, he helped me a lot. Because right now, I never imagine, I don't know how to say.
¿Qué? ¿Yo en español entonces? ¿En español decirlo si quieres? ¿Cómo se dice en español?
Pues nunca imaginé que...
No, está bien. Entonces me encontraste y ya.
The rest is history.
Lo encontré en la Casa Libre. Ahí lo encontré en la Casa Libre y él me ayudó mucho y por eso estoy estudiando ahorita.
Manuel?
Well, my trip to Casa Libre was a little bit like hard because when I arrived, I was in the border in Texas. Then it was a long process, and I'm going to tell you right now because it's a long story. But immigration moved me to New York, and from New York I needed a contact, and so immigration could let me free. I talked to my grandma, then she said, okay, you can come to Los Angeles with me. And I never knew how was Los Angeles, how was the US. When I was in my country, I had a different perspective of how was this and how was the people. And I lived with my grandma around 6 months. And I remember that I didn't like her that much because no, guys, I never had a family, you know, like my experience is always by myself. Always since I was a child, I wanted to be independent. I wanted to be like, I didn't like my mom like that too, because she was all the time training myself like garbage. And how I found Federico, I remember I had a process in the court. I had a process of the deportation process. And that was my crime in the U.S. Being in the U.S. without a permission. Then I was working with my lawyers. I got this contact in New York. They were working for me for free. Then one of my lawyers said, okay, we're going to court tomorrow. I'm going to send a guy that is a good person and you're going to meet him, okay? And then Federico came and picked me up. And we were talking the whole way to the court. He said, oh, I had a place. And I was telling him that I didn't like my grandma because she wanted to put a lot of pressure on myself. And I already was in the school. I already was an athlete for my school. And Federico told me, you can come to Casa Libre to live over here if you don't like your grandma. And then I moved to Casa Libre, and I enjoyed being there. I enjoyed my new family because we were like brothers with all the other guys. All the time we participate in different activities together. Christmas, Halloween, everything. And I was feeling good. And I've been thankful with this guy. All the time he knows that he needs something on there. Also, I'll trust him. If I need something, I'll call him all the time and ask him if he can help me. I had a lot of people like him that been helping me throughout my high school career and my life over here. And this is how I got to Casa Libre, people.
All right, I think that's going to be a great note to finish this up on, but we're not going anywhere. Casa Libre is going to be replicated, more importantly for girls. So, if you would like to talk any further about any of it, please find me, or please follow us on our social media. It's the best and strongest tool at our disposal, Casa_Libre on Instagram, and Casa.Libre.9 on Facebook. And feel free to come out to any events if you'd like. Thank you.